Hi all, Randy Green here, and welcome to the construction work on the timeline, which, of course, as with everything, is a process. It would be so easy if it was just do this, and then things will play out as they're supposed to. That would be lovely, right? However, the reality is somewhat different. It is today, November 27th, and I am, for the first time actually since 2013, actually all going back to 2012, where all of this madness in a way kickstarted. Things are settling as we get ready for the next phase that will begin on January 20th, 2025. But we are, those of us who have the awareness in the mix of the collective, we are aware that now until the 20th, it's all about getting things ready, organize our businesses, prepare for whatever may come. And then we know what we have been accustomed to most likely will be over for good. Of course, there are factions that would say, nah, it's just the next 4 years and then the table will turn again as it's done so far. And I'm saying, yeah, that might be the case. But the question is if it's going to be like we used to, or if we are, for instance, when we talk about in America, because that's where it changes every 4th year, more or less. Either, if there are two possibilities, either there will be a continuation, but with a different candidate, of course. That's why you have the vice president and then gets in training while the president is there. And then once the president has sit his or her 8-year period, well, then the vice president can take over. And that means that the Republicans or the Democrats can stay in power. Now, you're going to say, oh, Randy, I don't care about politics. I just want to know how to do business on the new timeline. And I can say, unfortunately, politics is part of doing business on the new timeline because everything is political, whether you will it or not. And when we talk about the other races and the councils or the adjacent realities or the multidimensional realities, they are imbued with politics from A to Z. So politics is everywhere. You can't escape it. Even though you might say, I'd rather not, but it is part of how reality fields are governed and how the reality field dynamics play out, how the resources are allocated, as well as the energetic and genetic, I want to say classification, properties, groups, lineages, all of these kind of things, how they play out their content within the reality setting. So that's politics too. It's just multidimensional politics. So politics is not to be evaded, but to be understood in its right context. Politics, as we have seen it here, is a kind of a mirror of political or stellar political or galactic political or cosmic political game that is going on. Because it is a game. It's a give and take. It's negotiations. The councils meet up. The extraterrestrials meet up, etc., etc. So there are all of these meetups where negotiations are done, especially when we talk about the groups that are a part of the regressed timelines, that are part of the fallen timelines. And then we have, of course, within these two groups that go rogue and do not care much about what the other groups are deciding. And as we have seen it here with COP29, I think we are at the climate top meeting with all of the G20 countries or whatever it's called, because I'm not so interested in all these little nitty-gritty details of human politics. But it's like seeing all of these little critters that we have at the regress councils and how they act out. They do one thing behind the closed doors, they do something else in the hallways, and when it comes to reality, they do exactly what they want to do. So they go around the table, negotiate, agree on stuff. Then they make their subsidiary agreement with people in the corridors, and then they return home and do really what suits them best. So that's what's the biggest takeaway here, is that even though there are negotiations and agreements, they are not kept, which we know. So that's a given, and that's a heads up and a little bit of part of the awakening process for those of you who are highly AVN infused, and have the New Age loving kindness aspect to everything, thinking that this is the world as it is. And I'm not such a person. I have been politically interested since I was 13. So I began early, and not because I want to participate in it, because it's a sham. We can all agree on that. It's a circus, it's a sham, it doesn't lead to anything. I realized that when I was 13. But it is part of the game, because this reality is a game where something is shown and other things are hidden and other things are cloaked. And you say hidden and cloaked. Yeah, hidden is it's hidden in plain sight. Cloaked mean it's clandestine and really only for the ones in the know. And then there are the higher dimensions of everything that is also unfolding. And this is part of learning to work on the new timeline while we are part of this reality. What I wanted to say is, going back to that whatever's going to happen over there has been a long-awaited unfolding. And why has that been a long-awaited unfolding? It has been so because it had already played out. And in the first run through, as you know, I've talked about in the future, where we had a little group of future humanities that went to the Andromedan system and returned. And I'm not going to talk about how it was, because some of these things have changed. But the future timeline that America now is on is so close to the original one. There are nuances that are different because they did get some groups out, but others have taken their place, and that means it technically ends in the same way, but with different groups. And that means different types of unfoldings and experiences. So in that manner, they have not succeeded. And that is a recognition and a realization that has been done in the future as part of the Andromedan system. And I'm telling you, they are quite busy figuring out what to do, what the next steps are, and how to go about it. So that's one leg of these processes that I'm going to share here, because that impacts the global initiations about infusing our planetary core. And before we go into complete panic attack and say, oh, they're going to really not pull that energy in. No, they are, but they are, as I've said from the get-go, it's in the 6th dimension, so it doesn't impact us much, but it keeps up the original construction. And there is no doubt, and it's been that from the get-go, that they are upholding the original construction so that it can be high vibrant enough so it can segregate, and by that get rid of the false cloaking, the false dressing, the false clothes that it has got on, aka our reality field. The whole game is to disconnect to the enclosure and everything that's in the solar system, which is the false dressing. It's been added on. It's not a natural reality. And that's completely okay. So once we got that established, and we know that that's the plan from the Andromedans, the future humanities are right now trying to consolidate with what's left of inner Earth. And in the little course, the mini course on your energy work and your timeline, I talk about inner earth there to the degree that is suitable as things are right now. So that's in that course where you'll get that information. So that's put in place. So where does that leave us inside this reality that are now entering onto our timeline, either as a true human or a true humanoid? Because this is the target group for this work that I've been doing. And I know in the energy work in your timeline, I'm saying I don't know much about the true humanoids, and I don't. But there is a little bit of information that will slip in here and there because that plays a part. There are still this remaining group of the true humanoids that needs to do the last leg of their awakening process. And some of them are in America, and they will discover the challenge that they have. And that goes back to the original strive where we had the groups that divided into true humans and true humanoids. And they still need to figure out, do they want to go the humanoid path or do they want to return to the true humans? So, but that's in that's high up. We're talking the 11th dimension here, so that's not really something that we are to be concerned with. But that goes back to the Lyran wars. So there is between Lyra in Lyra, people often say, well, Vega is part of Lyra. Actually, it's not. That's the humanoid branch. Vega is the humanoid branch. It's a star stellar system that was inserted as part of the original strife, and the Lyra itself is true human. So in that manner, we could say we have another example of something getting inserted that shouldn't have been inserted into the true humans. And that's the 511 pillar, because that's going up to the true humanoid in the Vega system. And that is what led to Maldak. That was which is what the Kalontics have called that planet, the fifth planet in our solar system that exploded due to wrongful use of technology. And that's still an issue that must be resolved from what's left of the group in the Andromeda system that are connected to what remains of the true humanoids in Vega, in the Vega constellation, or the Vega system, the Vega star, or whatever. It's not what we see on the sky anyway. So you can look up and say, oh, is there something? No, it's not. It's just an illusion. But we call it that area of the sky where that constellation is used to belong to an access point that goes into a parallel system that is the true Lyra as we understand it. And Vega does have different type of groups that with the humanoids, as many have reported, with humanoid features in various degrees. And again, this is not what I want to talk about, but these are part of the dynamics that are a part of the large scale political scene right now that will ripple into our reality somewhere or another. So we have that understanding. So once we can say, well, the true human are supposed to center themselves on that path of true humans that will lead to the 612 pillar and undo the effects there. The true humanoids are to go on the 511 pillar and decide whether or not they will reunite with the original civilizations of the true worlds, or they want to continue within the quadrants that are under the guardianship of the Vega constellation. And I just call it the Vega constellation because there are multiple stars. There's not just one star. If you really understand the dynamics of this, you will understand it's a system in itself and it's not part of the Lyran constellation. Okay, so that's also important to take in. And you say, well, what does that have to do with me? Well, not much. not really. Because it all comes down to segregation dynamics at the end of the day. Who will stay, who will go? And as we have experienced the last, since 2012, at least I have, so many groups have pulled out that belong to the old world order. And that leads us right back into, okay, so when we talk about that, will we return to a reality that business as usual? will this just be another hiccup where things will return to what we know as in the last time the Republicans had a pretty strong hold in humanity or in the American population? And I'll say no, because it's totally dissimilar this time. The political system, the democracy is effectively put out of play. The politicians that are now, quote unquote, politicians that are now going to get into the different seats in the White House and become officials there under the president have little to none experience in political shenanigans, let me just call it that. They're not trained politicians, so they will run it as a business. And that was the plan from the get-go, and that's the false prophet, book of Revelation play out. And all of the materialism and greed factions that are joining that, they will play everything out under whatever rule set, whatever decrees, that's not what I call, whatever creeds and whatever is executive orders, very difficult. All of that will be signs of a badly run business, because the man on top of that one does not have any clues on how to run a business. He ran all of his businesses into debt, and he is by all means has very little contact with reality as it actually is, even though people say the opposite. But that's because the ones that adhere to him, they have very little contact with reality as it is. And I'm sorry, people, I'm saying this. Some of you might be all hoo for that. But those of you who are not, you are probably sharing this one. And I'm assuming, and that's why I'm putting it here and not part of the YouTube membership, but doing it here in this little ongoing process of information is deliberately done so, because I know that some of my members in the other group are still doing the best of they can, but they, due to their genetic composition and due to the very complex dynamics in America, have been infused with the glamour that is or were surrounding the upcoming president. And I'm saying that because in the days, I kind of always knew he was going to be elected, because there's a lot of what we call magic around it. So I've been looking a little bit into some of the videos and whatever was going on, and I realized this weird thing as I was looking more and more on the upcoming president, deliberately not mentioning any names. Then there was this weird kind of enticement, as in suddenly, that's not so bad, and perhaps there's something to it. And the weirdest thing was that my rational mind, and I could hear what was being said, and I said, that's nationalistic. That is a country closing in on itself. That's a person that wants to disconnect from the rest of the world. That's a person that has no political sense. That's a person that has no Anyways, I was having this rationalization going on. At the same time, there was this weird kind of clogging or fog that came in and kind of overrode this kind of concern and this kind of perhaps. And then suddenly, after 3 or 4 of whatever what was being said, I was kind of, yeah, perhaps it's not. And my mind was just saying, look at that person. Look at how that person actually looks. Come on, it's an old Baal. Come on, you. I was just being, but that's how they've done. That's how the Baals have always done. That's how they got in power. All of these people you look throughout history, and you'll say, how could people have that as a king or as a person in control of a reality? And then you got, oh yeah, that's the materialism and greed, MAG alliances. And that's very, very important to bear in mind, that that's a replay of old history that they are now to play out. And because of that, there are some that will say, well, that's all of the ones that had adhered to these groups and were part of these groups that are now back in power and are sitting on all of the political institutions and organs in America are going to play out their cycles, and then it'll be done with. And what I'm getting, and everybody who has a larger sense of history and what's been going on in our reality field will say, is a little bit more than that. They will play out what they need to play out, and then they will jump into a timeline where they will continue, and they will do whatever they can to continue, whatever the means will be. And that's part of the closing in on itself, because it demands a lot of resources, and these groups always think that if they close in on themselves, they will have more, it's easier to administer, and I'm here saying it in a nice way, administer the resources. If they make a closed environment, then it's easier to administer the resources, not knowing, and that's why you can see people, whatever's been said over there, do not have financial, economic, or political savviness, because they have not studied politics, they have not studied economics, they have not studied the dynamics of economy. And even though there are people who say all of this is just theoretical, it's made up, it's actually not how it is, well, that's how the old world order played it for a very long time. So these dynamics are still at play. And until they can change these dynamics, they will still play out, and America will experience, like many other groups have experienced throughout time that have closed in on themselves, that they are not an island. Nobody's an island. The insectoids that closed in on themselves, to preserve their reality fields, they ended up as androids. And there needs to be an exchange rate. And many of the regress races realized that throughout the course of history. And they realized that they had to be in contact with the surroundings, including the true humanoids. They realized, we wanted to do our own thing, but they were still connected in ways and energetically to the rest of the universe. We are all connected, whether we will it or not, until the rubber band, as we say it in Danish, snap, because it gets stretched too much. Then it can snap. And that's the play out that we're in. They're not playing to return, as in kind of now it just goes to the far right and then it returns, or to the far left and then it returns. It's nothing about that. It's not about now we just have this kind of government, it will play for 4 to 8 years and then it will return to the other side. If it does return to the other side, once that happens, if it happens, what we understand as Democrats that were the foundation of the old world order, and the Republicans were the foundation of the Baals and the Neburians and whatever they had arranged themselves in the Mesopotamian lineage. So you're technically having a play out between the Egyptian brotherhoods and the Mesopotamian factions. And that's what's been going on in the States. And since the old world order has collapsed, the brotherhoods are pulled out, the avians are gone. They pulled out from America in 2016. And that's why I know it's not going to return, because if you look at what used to be the old brotherhood groups over there, they're no longer represented. Whatever will be there will either be parallel universal matrix races that will take out over what appears to be the Democratic Party, or perhaps the falling angelics, which we have seen within all of the other types of ideologies that are in America. We saw how the whole yoga community were taken over by the Qs, and how all of the New Age communities were taken over by the after 2012 version of the Kalontics that is now something completely different. And I'm here, again, whenever I say it as it is, I always get into trouble, because there are always people that are still listening and doing that. And in its original form, it had its purpose and function under the Syrian bees. But they pulled out in 2017 when the Orions came in. And that's part of the book material. People just need to go back and read it. It happened, it played out, but not as it was prophesized. And that's why, because all of these prophecies, including this one, can change. Because nothing is chiseled in stone until it actually plays out. And even then it can still be changed, because reality is dynamic, all depending on who's there, who comes and goes. So that's the political scene when we really begin to say, okay, I'm going to kind of run a business in a world that is now changing fundamentally. And I think that's the most important thing here for the first podcast that I'm putting in here is the understanding. And that's also part of the change maker material I made, which you can get for everything. All of my previous material is now offered for free on my website here. But and for the very reason that those who are now behind the laggards, that want to do what they came here to do, whatever that means. As part of the Regenesis programs, I talk about that in Energy Work in Your Timeline. They are having a very, very short window of opportunity now. It's I would say 3 months, and then that's it. And very few people can create the patterns of creation, as I talk about in the change maker material, change timeline connection points, adapt everything they need to adapt into a kind of a new business. It takes time. It took me since 2007 to build a whole academy. And I finalized it last year. And this is just the last piece of it where I'm kind of saying these are the updates for those who are now doing the last leg of this very, very long journey that began with the internal strife. That's the completion we're in on the highest level. It's a cosmic segregation that we are undergoing as well in these completion cycles. Not just our reality, it's all the way up. And the whole scenario that's going on in our world right now is that the countries will close in on themselves. That's apparent. And we have seen that dynamic many times. And there could still be a possibility that they don't. And that would be yay. But the tendencies are, as we have seen it, that's kind of how it is on the other realities that are connected to the different groups that are represented and left inside the enclosure. So, plus, if we go back and look at human history, you can say, well, it's no longer old world order, so they won't follow that dynamic. And I will say, let's hope so. However, the energies that comes from inner earth and from what's left of the future humanities that are now resettling, because the horse they played on is not going to win the game, and they have to play on a different horse, because now their big challenge is, do they want to be human or humanoids? And they have insertions of both. They're part of the Regenesis programs. They are human humanoids. So they have decisions to make. The whole plan was to begin with trying to create a future where that type of civilization could continue to exist. And the Andromedans supported that project, and that's part of the infusions to see if that could play out. As things are now, that project has failed, as everything does inside the enclosure. And why does it fail? Because it's an enclosure. It has closed in on itself. That was part of the whole project. It was only supposed to run for so and so, and then it was supposed to end, but it has been kept going via artificial infusions. And one of the things we are seeing played out in the world, at least from my perspective and my point of view, because that's my completion cycle and what I have argued in the councils again and again and again and again, is that once things no longer is viable, once it reaches a certain momentum where the viability rate is 30% or less, we can't keep pumping in energies. And you can say, well, the Andromedans are doing exactly the same again. And I understand the arguments that go in and say, well, if we don't give that energy, then it will fall completely into the abyss. And that's an issue with the ancient ones. And I will counter-argue, well, then we should have extracted it a long time ago instead of letting it run so far that it came into that danger of being sucked into the abyss. And that's always where there is a once whenever and that's probably why I ended up in exile in the Andromedan system, because there is always this, no, let's give it another chance. It will return. The laws of the cycle will fix it. The energetic and genetic capacities and affinities will fix it, etc., etc. They are always relying on the cosmic laws. But there are cosmic laws, and then there are situations where the cosmic laws no longer apply. And that must also be understood. And for those of you who just want to go in and say, I just want to focus on me and my own energy work, well, this is where I say, well, you have all of the free material to continue there. This little line of work I'm going to do here is the bigger picture that goes into politics and goes into the situation at hand with what is going on our planet as a representation of some of the issues that are going on the other realities. Because it's always been like that to a degree. Let me put it this way when I say it's always been like that. After the astral barrier came up some 15,000 years ago, that changed it. That created this insulated environment that we've been part of for 15,000 years. And it was only upheld by the different types of advanced technology, aka UAPs, and the holographic scenery. And it was run as a closed-in system where the infusions would come from the energetic artificial fourth and energetic artificial fifth, where the technology there would be connected to the original dimensions of the oppressors or the colonizers system. So it did get infusions, but not the enclosure. But since the holographic energetic architecture of the people inside the enclosure, completely oblivious that they were original multidimensional, that level were kept, what we could say, behind the hara quadrant, the chest quadrant, and the brain quadrant. And by that technology connected to the energetic parasites and the cube technology and the storyboards allowed this dynamic to unfold as if the higher order energy system was still in contact with the multidimensional realities, whereas the organic vessel were completely segregated in the outer domain. And the bridge was the hara quadrant or the three quadrants, which, I talked about in the advanced energy work and my book Tarology and all of the other material. And that was the whole setup, and that enabled all of this artificiality to function, of course, creating enormous amount of distortion, aka the astral plane, and a lot of breakdown with the organic vessels, leading to all sorts of weird mutations and cellular degradation and whatnot. So of course it was not forever, and that's why it is now reached its end point. And the infusion they then was doing with the hybrid projects from the races and all of that. And I'm so tired of repeating it, so I don't want to repeat it anymore, because we need to look forward. Now's the time where we segregate as well and say, that's history. Okay, we got it now. So let's move to the next leg where we leave that behind and say there are larger things at play here for those of us who are at this point in our activation process, where we now know this. It no longer needs to be repeated. And the poems are pulling out and most likely will leave behind the hybrid projects. They will still run a little bit in Eastern Europe as far as I know. But when it comes to the groups in America, they will play for the next 4 years to see if they can become the new quote unquote regress races, because the other group, the Baals and what they're doing, they are under the D10 collective, and they are a different group altogether. And where I'm going and how I look at things and how I say the proper way for me to continue this one. And I know for some of you that are in America that are listening to this, and you will say, well, Randy, then I lose interest in what you have to say. But that's due to laws, because what you focus on, you give energy. And if I continue to focus on what's going on over there, I'll give it energy. I'll give energy to the Baals. I'll give energy to the seven lower levels of the disastrous civilizations that grew out of the 2-8 pillars. I will give energy to all of these very, very old and dysfunctional type of genetics that just needs to collapse in on itself and cease to exist altogether. And that's the best way we can. There's nothing more to salvage. There is no more turnaround. These groups, they have no viability rate left. So they have no future. There is no future. But once a reality field or a part of a reality field gets to that level, and that was part of some of the technology that the Niburians put in play that ensured that the 2-8 pillar would not collapse the rest of the solar system once it was hit by the timeline event. Well, once that is recognized and the gates have been opened, because that's been the plan all along, beginning with 9/11. Well, if that's been the playbook for them to come back in power, thinking that they would then, via different alliances with different groups, etc., would keep the infusions going, or whatever it is, they are closing in on themselves as a country. And that's going to be the new domestic politics that's going to happen over there. And there are people that are supporting that, thinking that if we become nationalistic, that is all about us and our country, and we are no longer trading with others, and we are putting up trade wars and barriers where everything that's imported is super expensive, and by that no longer importing things from the other country. The upside down idea is that, well, then that will force the other countries to behave more nicely. But the matter of the fact is the other countries will just say, well, we got the rest of the world to play with. So if you don't want to play nice, well, then go play with yourself. Seriously, we're not going to play with you. You can play ball alone. You can go out. There'll be nobody to play with. But if you want to kick the ball up against the wall on your own, well, please go for it. We got the rest of the world. And that is when we talk about Canada, that's notoriously the high tower of the Dark Ones. They haven't decided yet how they want to play with the Baals. That's another level that needs to be figured out. And what's left of the regressed avian races that are in South America also need to figure out what they want to do. And there could potentially be a full alliance between all of these three where they find ways to do this that are, again, more nationalistic, which will then leave the whole Americas to reconnect to some of the groups that goes down to Africa. And then that will become kind of like a half moon in itself of these forces, which is what happens in the future. So by here saying it already played out. So the chances of that happening again, a little bit differently this time perhaps, is 70%. So with that said, we now understand, well, since it already played out, there really is no other possibility, since the tendencies and the choices are exactly the same as they were in the first run through, except from a little bit of deviation here and there. So for those of you who are over there in America, and when I now begin to focus on Europe and the future of Europe and focus my attention there, I have given everything I could since 2007 of information to assist you girls and guys and people over there to make valid choices, including what I did in Australia when things got complicated. To those who were listening, they got a chance to get out. I know in the beginning when I went to Australia, because that was part of some of the groups that came in, there was actually some of the POM races and the hybrid projects that were trying to do it differently down there, but that failed too. There were too avian infused. And when we deal with the Baals or the materialism and greed races, they are higher up on the food chain and they play differently. Let me put it that way. They play a different rule book that goes with wrongful use of energy and wrongful use of power, and they are aligned with the Orion system, which the lower level avian and POM races are not, and they have learned the lesson the hard way what these groups actually are and how they navigate inside reality. And that The councils have also learned that, and that's another what we could call a galactic threat that also needs to be taken into consideration. And that's part of some of the issues in the future humanities right now. They're fully aware of the implications of the different groups that are now represented inside our reality field. So my focus will then be, unless there's something important to say, and it's many, many years of conditioning. For some, again, we'll talk about glamour. All eyes have been on America since the 1950s. They have definitely played a rule book or a game book or a manuscript that has forced the rest of the world to look at them, for whatever reasons, for pluses and minuses, as either the country to help us or the one that would step in, or the big brother, or whatever it has been. And all of that is going to change. And that's the first learning process for Europe, that is to grow up now. And that's why the focus from the future humanities are now going to be to disconnect from the US and focus on that segment of Europe that will be capable of continuing as a continent within a larger continent, Eurasia, that is going to be super divided as well, as we will see, into a smaller group that can align with whatever's left of the North Pole entrance into inner Earth. And that will extend out into a new type of fourth and a new type of fifth, that those of us who are a part of the true human and true humanoid lineages, we will participate in that project, because that is the focus point for those of us who are now stepping into these two remaining lineages, that for all, as in kind of whatever's left of the original true human lineages, of which there were 12, they will step into one path, the true human path. Whatever's left of the original true humanoid groups, of which there were 11, hence the 511 pillar, they will step into what we call the true humanoids. And we will run parallel for a while until the true humanoids decide either to join, and then will become one mixed path that will have its exit point through the ninth dimension in the Andromedan system. And then once that has happened, the Andromedans will pull out their support for the what we could say the lower levels of the solar system, and then it will be completely extracted, and then we will have completed the cycles of the internal strife, and that's the completion that we are all looking for. So with this, I will end this first podcast in this podcast series. Thank you.